While Lustria is famous for being home to innumerable reptilian monstrosities, it is not the only place in the Warhammer world to host such creatures. The Southlands, imaginatively named for being located south of everything else in the Old World, can also claim its fair share of titanic reptiles. Indeed, the continents were once connected long ago before being split by unknown forces, and they possess nearly identical flora and fauna. Pterodons dance through the skies above both continents' canopies, while salamanders silently glide through their waterways. Even creatures as large as stegodons can be incredibly similar, an entire ocean apart. Yet, for all their similarities, the continent's inhabitants aren't perfectly identical. Most notably, the creature that formerly inhabited the medium-sized predator niche on both continents has differentiated into two distinct species. In the New World, this proto-predator became the beast known as Cold Ones, which will receive their own video in due time. In the Southlands and the neighboring Dragon Isles, they became the creatures known as Horned Ones. Horned Ones, as previously mentioned, are medium-sized predators by the standards of the Southlands. Of course, this means that they would be near the top of the food chain on most other continents. They stand nearly as tall as a man at the hip, weigh half a ton, and can be 20 feet long from nose to tail. Despite their size, they are still not alpha predators. Creatures such as Carnosaurs and Troglodons can prey upon even fully grown Horned Ones. To protect themselves from these threats, Horned Ones have small scales covering the length of their bodies. Combined with the array of medium-sized bone spurs running along their spine, these defenses make harming a Horned One difficult. While their spurs are nowhere near as daunting as a Razordon's spikes, anything large enough to eat a Horned One will likely suffer a painful poke if they should try. This can deter their predators, or at least slow them down long enough for the Horned One to make good on its escape. Ideally, however, a Horned One will need none of these defensive structures to survive. Their incredible speed and mobility let them outrun most threats they'd encounter in their jungle homeland. While their scales and spikes are quite impressive, it's their offensive talents that have made Horned Ones famous throughout the Southlands. The beasts possess a retractable second toe, commonly referred to as their killer claw, which they use to disembowel prey. Their powerful hind legs let Horned Ones leap upon their victims' flanks and backs, letting them reach vulnerable spots. Anything they can't target with their talons or claws will quickly be ravaged by their sharp, overlapping teeth. Additionally, their social behavior gives Horned Ones an edge over most creatures they encounter. They hunt in small packs, usually consisting of several related individuals. These groups will lay crude ambushes for animals much larger than themselves, relying on numbers and the element of surprise to overwhelm their prey. A calm jungle morning can be turned into a primordial bloodbath as 20-foot-long dinosaurs burst from their hiding places and ravage the throat, undersides, and legs of creatures 2 to 3 times their size. Stegodons, Bastillodons, and even the odd Carnosaur can find themselves under assault by a sudden swarm of Horned Ones. These packs are led by dominant males, which sprout the long, curling nasal horns from which Horned Ones derive their names. They will unleash a sharp call at the beginning of a hunt, letting its fellow pack members know that there is game to capture. Despite being related, there are a few key differences between Cold Ones and Horned Ones. Foremost among them is the Horned Ones' greater intelligence. Cold Ones are notoriously stupid and strong-willed, making them difficult to master in battle. Horned Ones, in turn, are significantly smarter than their Lustrian cousins. As a result, their ambushes are much more cunningly set than those set by Cold Ones. They're also faster on their feet than Cold Ones, able to dart through the undergrowth with incredible speed. Only masterfully controlled light cavalry has any hope of escaping their loping strides and fearsome jaws. Of course, these advantages have come at a cost. While their hides are thicker than a horse's, they are nowhere near as durable as the iron-hard scales of a Cold One. This makes them comparatively fragile in combat, and more reliant upon their ambushes going off without a hitch. Finally, from an ecological standpoint, they don't appear to have the subterranean presence that their Cold One cousins do. While Cold Ones will nest and spend a great amount of time under the ground, coming up to hunt, Horned Ones spend their entire lives above ground. Considering they rely upon their great speed to escape dangers, this makes sense. Caves often possess dead ends that could doom one of these fleet-footed predators to an otherwise avoidable death. As with all reptilian beasts living in close proximity to the lizardmen, horned ones have been domesticated in some capacity by the children of the old ones. The skinks of the Southlands, bereft of both cold ones and reliable saurus spawnings, have formed their own mounted division of skinks mounted on horned ones. These skink braves will ride horned ones into battle, harnessing their naturally aggressive instincts in service of the Great Plan. While not as tanky as Lustria's cold one riders, these soldiers are incredibly fast. They take on the role of fast cavalry within the Southlands armies, harassing enemy artillery and ranged units rather than engaging in pitched battles against heavy cavalry or infantry blocks. Total War Warhammer Horned Ones are a unit of heavy cavalry on the Lizardmen roster. If you couldn't immediately tell from that sentence, they're similar to the Horned Ones of lore in name only. First, every Horned One in the video game has a horn. Unless the Lizardmen are composing their Horned One rider units entirely out of dominant males, a terrible idea for maintaining unit cohesion, this changes a foundational part of their biology. Secondly, they're heavy cavalry, with more armor than Cold One riders. This is totally bonkers. In the lore, Horned Ones are light cav at best, very fast and very dangerous, but they shatter against any durable opposition. Cold One riders are supposed to be the heavy cavalry. In Total War Warhammer, though, Horned Ones are premier cav, not quite on the level of Demigryph Knights, but very close. They're a little worse and cost a little more, but the Empire is supposed to be a cavalry-heavy faction. The Lizardmen are not. Also, they rampage, and they shouldn't. One of the draws of Horned Ones is that they're smarter than Cold Ones, and Cold Ones only rampage because they're dumber than a sack of hammers. Horned Ones should be better than that. Finally, they're ridden by saurus in-game. That's wrong, they're supposed to be ridden by skinks. All in all, as a lover of the lore, these guys are just not great. However, as a lover of the Lizardmen in-game, I can't get enough of these guys. They're fast. They hit like a dump truck. Their melee attack, speed, and leadership are better than the Empire's heavy cav. They micro well. They even have a blessed spawning variant that has more HP than the baseline version and doesn't rampage, though that should be just part of the baseline. If I'm building up a late game Lizardman army on the campaign map, there's usually at least 2 of these guys that are coming with me. Sure, Pterodons or Ripperdactyls could probably fill the same role and do it better, but I like my land cav. That 90 armor is very helpful, especially compared to the Ripperdactyls, like what, 30? They do need a little less babysitting, and I appreciate that. Anyways, lore-wise, 0 out of 10, but gameplay-wise, they get the Sigmar's Chosen stamp of approval. That being said, if CA ever wants lore-accurate Horned Ones, or some brave modder wants to try their hand at it, here's how I would go about it. First, you need a model rework. Only the leader of the Horned One pack has the horn. The others are hornless. If we ever get unit champions added to the game, that would be a great way to distinguish the Horned One Rider's champion from the other models in the unit. Secondly, they need to be ridden by skinks. Sauruses don't ride on these things, and it would be fun to have a unit of skink cav in the game. These are both cosmetic changes, however. The big stuff comes in their stats. First, they should be faster, maybe with a speed of 90 or so. To balance that out and represent their role as light cav, however, they should have their armor reduced to 30. Their melee attack, melee defense, and weapon strength should all stay the same, as Horned Ones are universally regarded as being just as lethal as Cold Ones, but they definitely need their armor knocked down several pegs. Secondly, give them anti-large. Horned Ones hunt big dinosaurs almost exclusively, and they need to represent that in their stats. With their lower armor score, they won't be competing with Cold One Spear Riders for the role of being heavy cavalry anti-large specialists. Also, as ambush predators, their stamina should deplete faster than most units. In the real world, ambush predators are good for a burst of speed, not long sprints, and that should be reflected in the game. Finally, their cost needs to be adjusted accordingly to all these changes in multiplayer. I imagine this would be quite a nerf. If all these changes were made, they would be a pretty accurate representation of Horned Ones in lore. You could try to introduce a Southland-specific building that is either the only way to recruit Horned Ones or gives them a boost faction-wide, but that just seems needlessly punitive for any Lustrian Lizardmen. Now, as with all Warhammer dinosaurs, we have a science section. As longtime listeners know, I have some training as a paleontologist, so I like to at least go over where I think these fake dinosaurs would land within the group of Dinosauria. Horned Ones, however, also have an extra science lesson inherent to their design. We'll cover that first, before circling back to their relation to other dinosaurs. The fact that only dominant males in a horned one pack grow the horns their species is named for raises questions about their biology. Why does one male in the pack develop these structures, while the others, and their female counterparts, don't? It doesn't sound like they have any role in hunting or interspecies conflict, or else every member of the species would possess such a useful tool. This is why both male and female rhinos have horns after all. They're pretty handy. If that isn't the answer, maybe it's useful in intra-species conflict? After all, only males possess the horn, meaning it almost certainly has some use in reproduction. Perhaps male horned ones use their horns to fight for the right to mate, or in displaying contests. If that's the case, though, why don't all males have the horn? Presumably, if all males could reproduce, then they would all have them, and that way they could use it to jockey for status. Because only dominant males grow these horns, they probably aren't used in intra-species conflict, at least not in this capacity. While ruling out these two scenarios helps us understand why the two most obvious explanations aren't correct, it still doesn't actually provide an answer to our initial question. Why do these dominant males have horns, and other males don't? Though we may not be able to test them, two hypotheses present themselves. The first is that these dominant males are simply born for their role, with other males in the pack being reproductively incapable their entire lives. In this scenario, the horns are still used for interspecies conflict, but only between the dominant males of two different packs. The loser of these contests would be sent packing or killed, while the winner would claim their territory and add the other pack's members into its ranks. This doesn't explain why non-dominant males would even exist, though. The population would benefit more if these reproductively inactive males were females instead. Horned ones would be able to reproduce significantly faster than other species if most of them were females, with a few reproductive males mixed in, rather than having half their population completely uninvolved with child creation. Unless these reproductively incapable males are closely related to the dominant male and benefit from kin selection by keeping all of his offspring alive, this seems like an odd way to keep the species going. The second possibility is chemically induced infertility. Hypothetically, horn growth could be affected by pheromones. In this model, the genes that let the dominant male grow a horn also lets them release pheromones that inhibit horn growth in their fellows, which likely reduces or eliminates their ability to reproduce as well. The removal of said dominant male, and their pheromones, would let another individual develop their own horn, become reproductively active, and take the dominant position within the pack. Something like this isn't as far-fetched as it may seem at first glance. Some animals in the real world have similar group dynamics, with examples being found among insects and naked mole rats. While they aren't reptiles like horned ones, its presence across unrelated clades proves that it's at least possible for socially induced infertility to arise in reptiles, at least in a Warhammer fantasy setting. Of course, this doesn't answer what happens if a dominant male loses his dominant status but survives the experience. Does his horn fall off? Does it wither and get reabsorbed so the nutrients aren't lost? Deer will grow and lose their antlers on an annual basis, but those are supposed to be lost. Ideally, a dominant horned one won't lose their position until their death, so it won't make any sense for the horns to have a built-in detachment mechanism. Unless every battle for dominance is a battle to the death, this is a question that doesn't have a clear answer. Both hypotheses do seem plausible, but both also have their problems. Perhaps, due to their nature as imaginary dinosaurs, we'll simply never get a good answer about horned one reproductive habits, and how their horns relate to this. Now, with that out of the way, we can cover horned one phylogeny. After careful observation of their external physical traits, and several rewrites, I can say with some certainty that horned ones are fairly derived theropods, likely within Coelurosauria. It's a little hard to tell on flesh and bone models, as the defining trait of the clade is having their jaw joints beneath the brain case, not behind it, but I'm pretty sure that the horned ones in-game have this trait. This is strong evidence for their placement within the clade. That's not to say they're akin to the raptors they're modeled after, however. Those are part of Dromaeosauridae, which horned ones are decidedly not. You may be asking yourself, how can horned ones not be raptors? They and their cold one cousins are clearly based off of raptors, especially with their retractable second toe. Well, I'll tell you, it's because game designers suck at consulting scientists. Though they did do a better job with these guys than the Carnosaurs. Those guys were abominations. Horned ones lack pretty much every critical trait of Maniraptora, the broader group which Dromaeosauridae is a part of. Their hand position betrays a lack of a crescent moon-shaped wrist bone, a crucial synapomorphy of Maniraptora. Whereas horned ones have pronated hands, or hands facing the ground, already a big no-no in real-life dinosaurs, the unique wrist shape of Maniraptorans gives them a distinctive way of positioning their hands. Also, it's hard to tell with their fleshy bits still attached, but it does appear that they lack the bird-like hip seen in Maniraptora. Finally, Dromaeosauridae, the clade that non-avian raptors belong to, have ramrod-stiff tails as their synapomorphy, not their retractable toe. As you can see in this footage, horned ones have remarkably floppy tails. That thing should be unbending past the waist, not moving around like a worm, if they were real raptors. While it's possible horned ones ancestrally possessed all of these Maniraptor and Dromaeosaurian traits and lost them, the development and loss of so many features is much less likely than them simply never developing at all. The presence of the retractable second toe is likely a case of convergent evolution, rather than being within Dromaeosauridae. Without evidence to the contrary, parsimony suggests that horned ones are remarkable solarisaurs, rather than part of Maniraptora or Dromaeosauridae, which is still pretty good. When I first gave them a look, I thought they were part of Tetanurae, which is like way down the list. So honestly, I knocked them earlier, but kudos to the game designers at CA for actually catching a lot of these traits. With that bit of deranged esoteric science rambling out of the way, we've come to the end of our overview of horned ones. While they're frankly a small part of the lore, this was a lot of fun to work on. I appreciated that these guys really made me think about paleontology again, something which I should be doing more often. Gotta renew that library card. Anyways, I hope you liked learning about them too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on horned ones in the comments down below. If you'd just like listening to me blather for 15-ish minutes, you could consider leaving a like too. Also, if you really liked the video, you should probably know that I actually released it months ago to my beloved supporters on Patreon. I've been releasing my longer, 15+ minute long videos there several months before they're available to the general public. It only costs $5 a month to get this early access, so if the thought of waiting appalls you, or if you want to support me, which is a noble goal in and of itself, then check out the link below and consider joining. It helps me acquire the resources I need to make both these longer videos and my short form content, and as long as there's enough people on it every month, I promise to stay editorially independent and never accept a sponsorship from games like Raid Shadow Legends. If you're cool with the waiting and the possibility of a raid partnership though, don't worry. All Patreon videos will be released at the end of the year as a Hanukkah, Christmas, Festivus present. You're experiencing that right now actually, so happy holidays. That's all I have to say for today though, so until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.